And they say that's better, not to drop them off, but but they say it's better to get them started really young, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which seems scary intuitively. I guess the thing is you have to be counterintuitive to figure out what's the best thing. Michelle Lang is on the phone. She has a book called A Mermaid's Guide, Empower Your Child in Water and in Life. Michelle has an amazing set of credentials. Listen to this. Well, she's a competitive swimmer. You probably could have guessed that. She is a WSI instructor, water safety instructor. She's certified Red Cross swim instructor, a creator of the relaxation-based swimming method. It goes on and on and on. She's a martial artist, too. Black belt, Robin.
I know, isn't that great?
And a Reiki practitioner. Oh, look at all these things on here. And a filmmaker. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she's so amazing.
Michelle, it's an honor to have you on our show. Good morning, Michelle. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm good. Oh, that's so heartbreaking. I'm so sorry to hear about that 3-year-old this morning, but I'm so glad that he's okay.
I know. It could have been horrible, but fortunately, somebody noticed him under the water, and 2 minutes later, he was under there 2 minutes, but he's okay. That almost tells you that children have some kind of an instinct about water, don't they?
Yeah, well, you know what? They say that there is a really great study out there, which I've actually read, that even swimming lessons, even if your child doesn't know how to swim, if you simply get your child into water education classes, that alone is going to lower their risk of drowning. So it's possible that he had some early stages of swimming already locked into place, which literally saved his life. Even though he couldn't swim fully, he knew about the water enough to maybe hold his breath or have some other skills that helped him out in that scenario.
So is it across the board? Does every child have something instinctive, or do you, as you work with children, oh, this one's better than that one? Does that, how is it exactly for you as a teacher?
It's very different. I really was surprised when I first started teaching swimming how scary it can be for children, because I learned to swim in London with my mom when I was 1 year old, and it was very natural. It was a very natural process. But when I started working with children over 10 years ago, and I've taught over 10,000 swimming lessons, but as I started working with the kids, I realized how scary it is for a lot of them. And some of them really seem to enjoy the process, and others of them are quite fearful. And some of them have natural breath control, and some of them want to snort the water up with their nose. So in a Mermaid's Guide, it teaches parents really simple things to do in their own home, starting in their bathtub, to help their child have as many skills as possible to not only protect the child in the swimming lessons and learning to swim, but also 1 in 10 drownings happen in the bathtub. So if your child knows the first layer, which is breath control, well, now they have a better chance at saving themselves should they tip over in the bathtub or have something scary happen in the home.
How do you teach a child that small, though? How do you do it? How do you tell them breath control?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, breath is interesting because it's really, for children, they've never thought about it. It just happens, the body breathes. So the first stage of that is just going to be making them aware of their breath. You can even do this in the living room. You can play fun games like blowing a ping-pong ball off of a table and talk about, hey, you breathe. Now, the cool thing about that is not only teaching your child that, A, you breathe, but B, you can control your breath. And that seems so simple to us, but to children, that's kind of a new concept.
Okay.
So to be able to blow a ping-pong ball off, but more importantly than that, how to hold your breath. So how to take a big breath in and keep all of your bubbles. And I know this bubble conception is huge. People always tell their kids to blow bubbles under the water. I am the opposite of that. I teach all my kids that their body is like a balloon. So if they take a big breath and they know how to hold their bubbles, well, that's what's going to make them float. If they blow out all of their air from their mouth, well, they're going to sink. And that's a very scary feeling for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bet it is. Oh, my gosh. And so does the water itself become intimidating? And does fear make it harder for a child? And what I mean by intimidating, for example, let's say you're in the wading pool. That doesn't seem so scary, but you're in the deep end and it does. Meanwhile, you could drown in either end, right?
Yes. I mean, you can drown in up to 2 inches of water. So whether you're in the shallow end or the deep end, it's the same as far as that goes. But yes, you raise a really good point. So swimming is a counterintuitive problem. If you fall into the pool, your natural reaction is going to be want to scream and kick and panic. But what you actually have to do is know how to relax and let the water float you. So relaxation swimming is all about how do we build a trust-based relationship with the water with the kids so that they understand that they float on top of the water. If they take a big breath, keep all their bubbles, they float. And then when we're in the deep end, I always tell the kids, I'm like, do you float on top of the water or on the bottom of the water? And they're like, oh, we float on the top of the water. I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter how deep the water is. You just have to know how to, like you mentioned, keep your body against that fear, not panic, not be scared. Because if you swim scared and tense, well, you're going to get tired, and you have a much higher chance of drowning.
So I just want to bring up the fear thing for one. There was a story in the news. This is several years ago, and I won't tell you the whole story because it has nothing to do with what you're talking about. But there is part of it that does. There was an autistic boy who was, I think, 12 or so, and he was pulled out by the riptide. And long story short, he treaded water all night long and was rescued by the Coast Guard in the morning. Okay. But,
oh, my God.
But
Christopher.
I know Christopher's his name. But the lifeguard said this boy had, because of autism, no fear. He didn't understand what fear was. That's right? So he had jellyfish biting him all night long, apparently. And he was, of course, in the dark, in the waves, way out in the middle of nowhere. But because he had no fear, he just kept doing what he was taught to do. And the lifeguard said that's what saved him, was no fear.
Yes, the fear. And that's really why getting your kids into the swimming pool to practice and having them also practice, if they get a little bit nervous at a certain point, I mean, obviously make sure they're safe first of all, but you want your child to know how to work through a situation that isn't necessarily 100% comfortable. Now, don't start that way. So a Mermaid's Guide breaks down swimming into 3 easy phases. And you want to go through each of those and make sure that they develop a positive, trust-based relationship with the water. But the 4th kind of cherry on the top is what I call the push-through. And that's being able to think through harder problem solving. And there's some exercises in the books that you can do with the kids, like going to rescue something out into the middle like a ball. Now, a ball is going to be hard to rescue because it's hard to grab.
Yeah.
So children will sometimes panic, and you can talk them through that, be like, stay calm, take a floaty magic. In the floaty magic, there's a picture in the book, but take a floaty magic, come back. Just so they, exactly like that boy, they know how to work through that fear, because that fear is going to be your enemy in the water. It's almost like the water can feel that.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes I think that fear is instilled by the adults around the children, because how many times do we go to a swimming pool or go to the beach and we'll see the moms and the dads out there, they lift the kids high up in the air and throw them into the water. And they're screaming. And it's like, oh, my gosh, this is not fun.
Oh, they don't like it. My kids love that. Yes, that can be terrifying for kids. And as far as, like, that fear coming from adults, I mean, really, as parents, our emotions are contagious. So if we're nervous around the water, our kids are going to feel nervous around the water. The tricky thing about the water is drowning is the number 1 cause of accidental death for kids ages 1 to 4 over car accidents. It's a frightening statistic. So it makes sense that it's a scary situation for parents. But through educating themselves about the water by simply reading a Mermaid's Guide, even if they're like, oh, I don't want to teach my child myself, that sounds like not a fun activity. But by simply understanding how your child floats, how your child holds their breath, what simple empowerment phrases you should use with your child, well, now you're going to feel more at peace with the whole situation. And naturally, you're going to pass that sense of peace onto your child.
Well, you talk about swim circles.
Yes, I love swim circles. So this plays into the 3 phases of swim. So real quick, before we get to swim circles, because they have to know phase 1, which is float, glide, submersion. So that's about simply knowing how to hold your breath and letting the water hold you up. The 2nd phase is swimming, and swimming with intention. So once they know that the water holds them up, now all they have to do is understand that kickies make them move. So that's a very important distinction. The water holds you up, and kickies make you move. So many kids think that they kick to float. I mean, adults often think that also. But if you know how to hold your breath, now you could float there, front float, face down, arms and length extended, for as long as you can hold your breath. And as long as you're keeping your bubbles, you can hold your breath for quite a long time. So
Wow.
swim circles are a really nice.
I don't think I ever learned that one. I need to learn that one.
Yes, no, that's a new one because it's a different way to look at the water.
Huh.
But yes, you should try it. And as adults, you're going to have to kind of play with it a little bit because we're so used to blowing out our bubbles. But if you find yourself getting water up your nose as you try this in the pool, you're like, I'm going to give this front float a try and see if I can hold my breath and float. You may struggle a little bit at the start. Kids are much better at this. But if you can just hum instead of blowing mouth bubbles, so hum slowly, like sing slowly to the water. Because what happens
My
is
Body Wise Over the Ocean, that one?
Yes, perfect. That's going to be perfect. The water will love you. It will hold you up. If you can just gently hum, then you're going to blow all your air out slower and be able to float longer. And then you can also try floating on your front and then blow all your mouth bubbles out, and you'll immediately start to feel yourself sinking. So it's a good buoyancy test. So swim circles are great because in your brain, studies have identified 175 neurons that basically spy on your breathing. So they're going to take note if you're panic breathing or if you're doing deep belly breathing. So with children, you hold your hands out and they place their hands in yours, and you basically just walk in a circle, and they're doing that front float. So the front float, I call it floaty magic. And they're holding your hands, and when they need a breath, all they do is look up to the sky, and then they look back down. So they're doing the motion of looking up and back down. But by doing this, they're naturally doing meditative breathing. So they look up, take a breath, back under the water. And then you take a few more steps, they look up, and then back under the water. And I've had kids who are just about panicked, and I teach them the swim circle, which is naturally a meditative breathing, and it just changes their whole demeanor.
Wow.
Oh, that's excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
Wow, no wonder you're so good. I want to... Where are you? Are you in California or Florida?
Yeah, I'm in California, but I love Florida. I used to come down every single Christmas and stay with my grandparents and swim in the ocean. Florida's amazing.
Yeah. Do we do a disservice to the children if we buy them those floaty things that wrap around their arms?
The floaty things that wrap around their arms are horrible. I don't know who invented that. But in the book, I do a case study about floaties, and people are a little bit surprised. My number one is keep your sanity first. If you're on vacation and your child's in the water and you don't want to be in there every single second of every single day, by all means, you can put them in some floaties. But be sure to take them out of floaties and work on all the skills in a mermaid's guide. Work on front float, work on proper breath control. So they don't think that they're floating because they have a floaty. Their body's like a floaty. But if they do floaties that are like water wings on their arms, those are the worst because you don't float from your arms. You float from your chest.
Yeah,
you want to try and find a floaty that keeps the center of buoyancy in the right spot. So a life vest keeps it in the right spot. I've seen some really crazy ones like around the neck. That is wrong. You don't want to float from your neck. You don't want to float from your legs. You want to float from your chest. And then just make sure that you work with it and work without it, and just always know that even if your child has one of those on, you still need to watch them because I've seen some children get in some really compromising positions in those floaties, and their parents think that they're safe in those, and they are definitely not.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great observations, too, is that the parents have to be with their children all the time, that they're in the water and around the water, because that's the child's number one lifesaver right there.
Yeah, so an adult supervision. Now, there's 3 layers of protection that I talked about. The first one's pool gates, covers. You know, you mentioned you have a lot of rivers there. Obviously, that layer of protection is not there. You can't put a pool cover on the river. So the second one is going to be that adult supervision. 88% of drownings happen when children are, quote-unquote, under adult supervision, like that 3-year-old that just was, quote-unquote, under supervision, and he still had a near-drowning experience. Thank God it was a non-fatal, which is huge for that child. But so the third layer is what's so important. It's about water education. So the first part of that is the mental aspect. Teaching your children, you never go in the pool alone. You always go in with a grown-up. And I say that to my children. I have 2 little ones. I say that every time we're around the pool. You always go in with a grown-up. And I tell all my kids that I teach, before we go in, they have to ask, may I go in the pool? And if you make that a really strict habit with your children, that can be life-changing. So they don't wander into that pool alone.
Yeah.
And then the second part is the physical aspect. teaching your children how to swim. So if they fall in, they can jump, turn, swim back to the edge. If something accidentally happens and they get pushed in, God forbid, especially for an older child who's maybe at a pool party. And, I've seen some rowdy things around the pool.
Yeah.
Some child is another child, and can they swim back to the side? That's huge, because drowning's a silent killer. That's why that in the pool with the 3-year-old, no one can hear that child. They're underwater. It's scary.
I know.
The good news is that it's almost always preventable. Almost always preventable.
Okay, I want to just change it a little bit and ask you about snorkels and masks. Do you in the book teach how to use them properly, or is that kind of not even the same thing as we're talking about?
No, that's totally fine. So I talk about goggles. My big thing with goggles is if your child's having painful eyes under the water, by all means, put them in goggles. No one wants to have salt water in their eyes. If the pool's really chlorinated, go ahead, put them in goggles. And then always practice without goggles a few times. Same idea with the floaty. You just don't want them to think that if they fall in a body of water, they must have goggles on. So it's imperative that you practice with and without. As far as like the mask goes, if your child's just swimming around, not snorkeling, looking for fish or whatever, you want to make sure you use goggles that don't cover their nose. Because if it's covering their nose, they can't do my favorite, humming. They can't sing to the water.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, so you really want to avoid the ones that cover their nose, unless they're snorkeling, in which case that's a whole different situation, and then they'll have to learn how to breathe with the mask, and you'll want to practice that, what to do if the water gets in the
But is that,
how to pop it out.
I think my question is mostly about age. Is snorkeling something we would teach only once they became teenagers, or at least 10, or do you do that when they're really young also?
I do it as soon as the child can do all 3 phases of swimming and also has the mental toughness of the push through. Okay. Most of the children that I teach are between ages 2 and 4. So children can learn to swim at a very young age. Obviously, the younger the child is, the longer it will take. My daughter could swim with breath all the way across the pool at 19 months old, popping up normally, not that.
Well, look who her mom is.
Yeah, right.
How did
I have to get her up there.
How did it happen for you? Were your parents big on teaching you how to swim, or was it just a natural thing for you?
Yeah, my mom is actually a really gifted teacher, and she taught me in London when I was 1. I was super young, and we were living in London at the time. And then all growing up, I was a competitive swimmer. She actually teaches teachers how to teach. So as a child, I would travel around with her. So I had a leg up as far as knowing how to communicate with children, which is really a big part of swimming that a lot of people don't focus on, is not only the physical aspects of swimming, but the mental and almost the spiritual aspects of swimming. And so a Mermaid's Guide gives you 5 really good, I call them Mermaid Golden Rules. And those can be used both in the pool and out of the water with your child, which are in the book to help establish trust so your child can feel comfortable in new and uncomfortable situations.
So I want to tell you about something. This is kind of an aside. This is almost like on a tangent thing, but we have a place not too far from here called Weeki Wachee. Have you ever heard of it?
Weeki Wachee? No, what is that?
It's mermaids. It's a state park, but they have girls dressed up like mermaids, and they put on this show behind glass. And
underwater.
It's really cool.
Oh my gosh.
It's really cool. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
You should go there.
I need to go perform.
And they have these hoses that they breathe from. But anyway, so right next to it, I believe that they swim in the spring, right, Robin?
Yeah, they do.
I don't mean the season. I mean the spring of water.
Yeah.
The beginning of the river. And then just a little bit down from there, there's a public beach. So I took my son when he was little to that public beach. And when you go underwater, you can hear the music that the mermaids are using over at that show.
It's so cool.
And when you said swimming as a spiritual thing, I thought that was my moment of spiritual. I went underwater, and I said, my son's name Alex. I said, Alex, put your head underwater. They got music going on under there. You can hear the music underwater.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, how the sound waves keep traveling down through the water, even though you can't hear it above the water.
I know.
That's awesome.
So what did you mean by spiritual?
Spiritual in the sense that you have to trust that the water will hold you up. So it's a metaphor for life more than anything. You have to know how to conquer your fears in a peaceful and powerful way. You have to know how to dig inside of yourself and stay calm if you get a little bit of nerves. So with children, a lot of my job really is to coach them through the first time they're coming up against something that's life or death. I mean, it's literally life or death, and I am teaching them how to survive in it. So a lot of the times that can be very scary for kids, but it doesn't have to be. It really can and should be one of the most empowering experiences of your child's life. But the most important part of that is to make sure that they trust you in the situation. So that's where those golden rules come in. But the spiritual aspect of looking at them in their eyes and connecting with them and saying, you are strong and you are brave and you can do this. And you can see their little minds churning and being like, I am strong and brave. And within learning to swim, there's one big hurdle. But within that, there's tons of other little progression hurdles that you have to go over. And what happens is your brain creates these positive mental loops with the try, fail, try again cycle. And you just build their little minds to think, I'm doing something hard. It's okay to do hard things. When I keep trying, I succeed.
Yeah, they say this first 7 years of our lives is when we absorb the most knowledge that we use the rest of our lives. And swimming is a really good one. Once in a while, I might be hyping something to beyond, but I don't think I am when I say I believe this book will save people's children's lives.
They will. Might even save their lives, too.
I think so, yeah. I don't mean to be too hyping about something, but I mean, it sounds like what you've got in the book is going to be very, very useful. Okay, I found A Mermaid's Guide, right? That's what it's called, A Mermaid's Guide, on Amazon. Do you have a different website you want to direct us to?
You can go to Amazon or relaxationbasedlifestyle.com, and that webpage gives a lot of information about the book also.
And that's what you came up with. That's what you created to help the children.
Yeah, so I run a company called Rebel. It's spelled RBL, but it stands for Relaxation-Based Lifestyle. And what Relaxation-Based Lifestyle does is it brings calm into unexpected places. So, for instance, in the pool, which is usually a tense, scary situation, we break it down and it's simple, and we help everyone feel at peace with the process. So relaxation-based style has a few different aspects. You mentioned the filmmaking, so we do films that also either bring calmness through entertainment, laughter, or insight. The swimming is relaxation-based swim method. So it all connects in this through line of bringing calmness in unexpected places.
When children are blind, are they more fearful of the water than the sighted children?
Well, the seeing definitely helps. And, I mean, the kid can be blind, or your child, if you have a child who doesn't like to open their eyes underwater, it's that same feeling. It can be disorientating just in the fact that they can't see that they're floating. So if you have a blind child, you'll want to use a lot of the exercises where your hands, like floaty magic, for instance, when you're teaching them how to front float, instead of just dropping your hands away from their hands because they can't see that they're floating, you're going to want to touch their bellies lightly with your hands. So just tap their tummies so that they can kind of get the feeling. You want to do this with sighted children too when they first learn. But so they always have sort of a point of reference. So as they're swimming, they feel very protected. And then you'll teach them how to use their hands to kind of do the sensory aspects instead of being able to use their vision.
The book is called A Mermaid's Guide, Empower Your Child in Water and in Life. I think you just gave us some of the Reiki part of what you also have studied. Michelle Lang, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
That was really good. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. An area of western Arkansas is evacuated. A levee along the flooded Arkansas River breached in the city of Dardanelle, letting water rush through. Fred Hale's a farmer there. He moved his cattle.
There's several farmers that have corn.